If anybody needs a seat and they don't have one, we can try to round up some extra chairs, so just let us know. Very pleased to have you all here tonight, this really special evening. How many of you were at last night's event?
Oh, yes.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. You could have just come for a sleepover, just stay this. It would have been fine. So, in any case, I'm so glad you're here as well for this evening's event. And we're very pleased to have the Davenport family here. If I can ask them to stand up, please. Thank you very much. Everyone, a round of applause. They've just been such a delight to talk to and share emails with and do phone calls with over the last 10 months. So we're just so thrilled that they're here, and they've been enjoying Sitka. And of course, we have our guest speaker for the evening. Some of you have seen her before. This is sort of like her second home, Shelley. And I'd like to turn it over to her. She's a Chilkat weaver who came from Anchorage, and we have a lot for her to cover this evening.
I'll try to keep it brief.
And just let me know when you get back.
Okay. Well, why don't we do that now?
Okay.
Da-da-da-da. Here it is. No sense in keeping it under wraps anymore. There you go. Woohoo, huh? So that's probably some really appropriate light for this particular robe. My name is Shelley Laws. I am Tzka. I'm Dakhretan, Kagwantan Yedi, British Yedi. And my mother is here, and I am a weaver. I've been a weaver since somewhere in my mid-20s when I realized I probably should start trying to weave. Before that, nobody can sit still long enough to try to weave, I think, other than maybe Violet, my great niece who's trying to weave, but she's more patient at 12 than I was. I've come down from Anchorage because I was invited to look at this beautiful robe. I got a phone call and Jackie said, "So do you have time to come to Sitka?" And I said, "Absolutely not. I'm building a house. I do not have time." So we're getting this robe. I said, "I'll be there." I will be there. I am very, very interested in Chilkat. In Anchorage, it's hard to teach yourself to be a weaver. There weren't, when I was trying to learn how to weave, there weren't any weavers around that I could go to and say, "I would like to take some lessons from you." So I kind of had to just research it and do it on my own. And that's kind of hard to do with this particular art form. It's a little more complicated than I had thought at the age of 25 when I thought I could do anything. Give me a couple of books, I'll figure this out. This isn't hard. Yep, it is. Yep, it is. It takes a long time. So I'd like to start by explaining a little bit about Chilkat. I know there's a lot of you here. I mean, you live in Sitka, so you probably know Chilkat and you know Raven's Tail and you know basket weaving. But for the benefit of our donors and anyone who doesn't understand, I'd like to explain a little bit about the differences in the weaving. So Tlingit were weavers. I bought these glasses new. They still have a little sticker on them. What is that? Tlingit wove two-strand twining. We didn't have pots. We didn't do pottery. We didn't do a lot of that. Everything was vessels that were made of woven material. So it was two-strand twining, and a lot of it was with spruce root. So some of the earlier vessels were spruce root. And I have some pieces here that I am not a spruce root basket weaver, but it is something that runs in my family for many, many generations. And so this is a basket that was woven by my sister Terry. Many of you knew my sister Terry. And it's a beautiful basket. It's a rattle top basket. If you shake it, here, I'll demonstrate on you. Can you hear it? Yeah, inside there's the stones from a goose's gizzard. When you went over to Terry's house, you didn't just automatically think if it was in the fridge, you should eat it. And then this is a basket, next generation, that Erin, her daughter, wove. And I got it because I was her auntie and it was her first basket, and so I got it. And then this is a basket that my daughter wove, and it's her first basket. And then inside Terry's basket is another one that Terry wove, but The roots from it were my great-grandmother's that she had gotten from Mom. The roots last a very, very long time. And although she said it was hard to weave, it was still weavable. The materials were still usable. So Tlingit people were into weaving. So from this, it went to more weaving. So this is very similar to the baskets. It's the same style of weaving. It's just wool. This is actually an older, it looks very new and splashy and bright. They're calling it Raven's Tail now. I don't know what they called it then. This was the next thing they were doing. And it's still the basket patterns. It's still the same style of weaving. It still starts at one side and goes to the other and then gets tied off, and then another one and another one. And this is a bag that's Raven's Tail. So then from the Raven's Tail. Yes. I'll be as loud as I can. They don't have a mic in here. I'm sorry. So this would be Raven's Tail. This is Chilkat. So Chilkat is also two-strand twining, just like the baskets. You've got two strands going over your warps. There's no shuttle. There's no weight on the warps. It's just every stitch is done by hand like that. But with Chilkat, it went from one side to the other to you could go back and forth. So it became more like painting with wool. So then you could do the recognizable patterns. Like this one is a ghost bag. I've seen a lot of these in the museums, the ghost bags, and I've asked a lot of questions. And if anybody in here knows, let me know what the ghost was all about. I'd ask, so what's the ghost about? And they'd say, it's a ghost. Okay, so no, it's a ghost. So this is the ghost bag with the patterns, and I saw this pattern and these patterns on a tunic that I saw in the Smithsonian Museum of Nature and History, and so I did this sort of as a tribute to that tunic. It was a full tunic, and the ghost was in the back, and the patterns were in the back. Then the front was more totemic. So this is Chilkat, and this is Chilkat, only on a bigger scale. So the thing that I like about Chilkat, and the fact that you can do patterns that are recognizable, and they were done as patterns that were recognizable, is that then they became the holders of stories, and the holders of events, and the holders of the memory of people. And yours is no different. You know, you get I would say that when the missionaries came, and when the traders came, and the Russians came, and everyone came, they saw this people with a very, very rich culture, and with longhouses filled with this incredible artwork. They said, but these people, they are savages, they have no written language. And I would propose that, yes, indeed, we had a written language. It's just that our writing wasn't necessarily in letters and numbers. It was represented in forms and in form line, and this was how we remembered who we were. This is how we remembered things that happened. This is how we remember the important stories, the important legends. So some of the robes that I've seen in museums have been obviously a story robe, and the museum people would say, so what is this story? And I'd say, well, my best guess, because it was always my best guess, because it's hard when the book that you don't exactly know the translation for goes away, and then you get the book back and you've kind of lost the words, you know, so it's hard. I can look at one and say, well, this is definitely an eye, and this is definitely a hip joint, and but to tell them, well, it's the story of fill in the blank, I cannot, except for ones where you recognize the story. So that's what the Chilkats became, and they were very, very important to the culture because they were our history. They were our repositories for information. So at that point in my lecture, I'd like to call up a guest speaker who, since when you weave a robe as a weaver, and you take it off the frame, you know, you have ideas where you want it to go. You have ideas what you want it to do, what you want people to learn from it, know from it. And just like when you have kids, That's the last control you have over that road. It goes on and it does stuff. I mean, even mine, and I still have this. It still is doing stuff without me, you know. So a lot of the story of this road is for you.
Well, I can tell you some of the story of the road, at least the part that we know. First of all, it's mostly oral history through our family. To the degree there were any letters that would have documented exactly where the road was and how it came to be in Middletown, New Jersey, those have been lost. So what I was told, and my sister Gloriana remembers also being told, and I think we were told probably on a number of occasions by my grandmother. Well, first of all, let me start by saying, as I think I mentioned last night, there were 7 children in my parents' family. We lived in New York City, but our grandparents, our grandmother on my mother's side, lived in Middletown, New Jersey. And they had built a house there. My grandparents had built a house there in around the 1930s. We used to spend all of our summers, literally as soon as school got out in June, we were sent to my grandparents in New Jersey. They had it was actually a very lovely place. We had the kind of the run of a lot of time spent in the woods and a lot of open space. And what some people think of as New Jersey today as what the New Jersey Turnpike, which is horrifying. But New Jersey really is a garden state, and there's very beautiful spots in it, and my grandparents lived in a very beautiful spot. So we spent all of our summers from June until school started in the beginning of September in New Jersey. And this robe was, as I mentioned yesterday, was hanging in the hallway in my grandparents' house on the landing up the stairs that went up to the second floor. And what my grandmother told us, and I think on more than one occasion, was that this robe had been a gift to her great-grandfather from Seward when he came back from his trip to Alaska after the purchase of Alaska. That story remained embedded in my brain and embedded in my sister's brains, that this had some very important, it was a blanket that had a very important connection. I didn't know much. I don't know that my grandmother knew very much about the blankets and what the significance of the robes were. I don't remember her ever talking about that, but that it was a significant, and also even as a child, I thought it was very, very beautiful. Walking down the stairs every day and walking past this lovely, lovely piece and wondering as a child, what were those eyes? Who was this? And I spent a lot of time thinking about that. So I have gone back as a result of deciding to gift this to the museum. I tried to go back and reconstruct history. But as I say, I don't have any writings to document what I'm about to tell you. We did have a great-great-grandfather, Ezra Abel Huntington, and he grew up in New York State. He went to Union College, which is actually where Seward went to college, but they were 3 or 4 years apart and did not know, I know that they did not know each other in college. He then became a Presbyterian minister, and he was the minister of a church in Albany for a number of years. Again, there was a point in time where I thought, oh, the period that he was a minister in the church in Albany would have been the same period that Seward was in the legislature, in the New York legislature, and then governor of New York. And I thought, well, maybe they got to know each other. Maybe Seward was a Presbyterian, and maybe Seward went to his church. But no, that I've since discovered they did not know each other during that period. He then was invited there is a seminary, a Presbyterian seminary called the Union Seminary. Union Seminary, right, David? Union Theological Seminary in Auburn, New York. And he was invited to become a professor there. And Auburn, New York, as some of you probably know, is also Seward's home, and his home is now a museum. It's called the Seward House, and it's a gorgeous. I've only seen it in pictures. I haven't actually been there, but it's a very beautiful old home. And Seward spent he grew up there, and when he retired after being the Secretary of State, he went back to live in that home. And that is where they probably got to know each other. I have been able to find one letter that the researcher at the Seward House was found for me, that between Seward and Ezra, which actually it's a letter that's dated 1864 or so. It's while the Civil War was still going on, and it is a thank you letter from our great-grandfather, I should say, to Seward, because Seward had made a donation to the library at the Union Theological Seminary of his letters as Secretary of State. And it so happened that Ezra was, in addition to his other teaching duties, he was the librarian. And so he wrote to Seward. The letter's very formal, and at that point they clearly did not know each other, but it does refer to the Civil War and Ezra's support for what Lincoln and therefore Seward were trying to do. So it's a very moving letter in that sense. There the trail unfortunately stops. We're not able to find any more letters between the two, and so when they actually got to know each other well enough for Seward to make this kind of a gift to him, I don't know. But at some point, my best guess is that Ezra is the person in my family to whom that gift was made. Basically because because they were about the same age, and that there was a period of time, quite a long period of time actually, after Seward retired, that he lived in Auburn, and Ezra was Ezra taught and became a professor emeritus at the Union Theological Seminary, basically until he died. His son, he had several children, but he had a son who came to live with my grandmother and grandfather in Middletown, New Jersey, after they had built the house, so sometime in the 1930s, and died in Middletown, which is actually why I know that he came to live with them, because the genealogical chart indicates that that's where he died, and that would have been the logical place for him to have come to live with him towards the end of his life. I assume that he then brought the blanket with him, and that my grandmother then inherited it. There were, I think I mentioned this yesterday, there were 2 fires in my grandmother's home. The first fire occurred while my grandparents were still there and severely damaged the home. All letters, my grandmother actually saved everything, but all the letters that she saved so carefully that may have had a letter that would have given us more information were burned in the fire. But this, and I think it actually, as I said yesterday, it shows, first of all, how strong the spirit in this blanket is, that it survived. But it also, I think, is an indication of how valuable my grandparents thought this blanket was, because it was totally unharmed by that fire. So they must have rescued it very, very quickly when they realized that there was a fire. There was a second fire in the house after both my grandparents passed away. My mother inherited the house, and my parents lived there and then my father died in 1987. In 1987, shortly after that, I guess 1988 or so, there was another fire in the house, an electrical fire that did substantial damage to the home. Again, this survived, and there's no indication that, I think, on the blanket that was ever burned or damaged in any way by the fire. And again, I think my mother, it was probably one of the first things that my mother rescued from the front hall. And that's really as much as I know. Anything, Gloriana or Caroline?
And then it went to Vermont.
Well, then it went to Vermont. Well, that's good. Yeah. Yes, its other home. Its other home, which we think happened maybe in the late 1980s. So it was there with the second fire. So in the late 1980s, perhaps. My mother gifted it to me, and she brought it up to with my niece. She brought it up to Vermont, and it was hung in my front hall in my house in Vermont that I've had for the last 40 years. And was frequently, I can tell you, an object of discussion when people would come to the house and see it, because it's such an unusual object. Not only is it incredibly beautiful, but it's very unusual in Vermont to see anything like this blanket. And it wasn't, I didn't know much about the history or where it came from. Or the tribe, until I think my husband and I went to Ottawa, and we went to a museum in Ottawa that had a Chilkat blanket, and I said, that's our blanket. And it was at the museum in Ottawa, which is a wonderful museum, has some incredibly wonderful totem poles as well, from the Northwest, had a gift shop that had books, and when I bought several books, started reading about it, and it was kind of at that point, at some point after that I began to think it needs to go back home. It needs to be something that it means so much to people here, and they need to be able to see it and to enjoy it. And as much as we have loved having it in our house, it needed to go home, and so we're very happy that it's here.
We're happy too.
Yeah. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to try to answer. But that's really as much as I know, I think.
Evan has a question.
Yes.
How did you find out that it should come here?
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, thank you. Well, I that again was such a wonderful thing that happened. My profession was I was a judge, a trial judge in Vermont for a number of years, 25 years, and retired in 2014. And I was invited by the National Judicial College, which is in Reno, Nevada, to come and teach a course on child custody with a couple of other professors. And Pete Esquiro was one of my students. Yeah. And I remember very well Pete getting up and talking the first day when people were going around and people in the class, they were judges from all over the United States, talked about who, where they were from. And Pete talked about Sitka, talked about how beautiful Sitka was. And I remember thinking, I have to go to Sitka. And then he and I had several conversations, and he told me that he was 50% Tlingit, and I knew that the Chilkat blanket was, at that point, was from was made by the Tlingits. And so I said, oh, maybe you're the right person for me to talk to. I have this blanket, I have this robe, and I have wanted to find a good home for it, a good place for it, that it could be seen by people who love these weavings. And I think it needs to come back to the Northwest. And Pete said to me, well, my wife Margie is here, by the way, and he pulls out his cell phone, he says, I'll just give her a call. And Margie came over from wherever she was, at the hotel or whatever, and she came over and she said, oh yeah, I'm friends of the Sheldon Jackson Museum, and that would be a perfect place. Sounds perfect to me. And that's how that happened. Thank you.
Thank you. So you've all been privileged to hear the first telling of the legend of the Davenport Road. So Chilkat robes, they do travel, and they always go on a journey. And many of them go on journeys for very far. When I started trying to weave Chilkat, I really didn't realize what I was getting into. So I got all the books, like she bought the books. I got all the books and started reading it, and I realized that I needed more. I couldn't just get it out of a book. I tried. I really did try. I read all the books and I stared at them, and I stared at my wool. And so then I started going to the museums, because I didn't have a mentor to go to in Anchorage. I thought, well, where can I find a mentor for weaving? I guess that would be the museums, because there's old robes there, and you can mentor to an old robe. You can stare at an old robe and go, how did they do that? You have to stare a really long time, because it takes them a long time to answer you. So I started going to museums, and I have some pictures, because I feel funny just staring at me while I talk. I'm starting out, I was going to have this up and I forgot to turn it on. This is a picture of course, this robe. So I started going to museums and looking at robes and thinking, well, how am I going to do this? Actually, I'm telling the wrong story for this picture. Let me change my story. For Chilkat robes, I was talking about the techniques, and you go into Chilkat, and in Chilkat and Ravenstail, they're both twining, but they are not from spruce roots. They were from wool. And so when we were starting to try and figure out how to do it, Terry and I, my sister and I, had many conversations about the material and started trying to figure out how to get our hands on some mountain goat. And we started asking people, once again, you go to the museums, and the story at the museums and the stories with the people that we asked was always the same. Well, the women went out and gathered it off of the bushes when the mountain goat shed. I was like, well, that sounds good. Yeah, that sounds good. So we decided to go gather some mountain goat wool. So we took a plane and went to Glacier Bay, because they have a lot of mountain goat there. And we decided we were going to gather some wool. So we tried. And, I don't know how many times you've seen mountain goat, but that's usually what they look like, only they're not wearing red. They're up there, they're that single dot up there on the hill, and Terry and I discovered on this trip that my sister was afraid of heights. And she'd say, there's some, go get it, and I'm not afraid of heights. I am the younger sister, right? So she pointed at me, you see the white right by my feet, she said, there's some, and I ran over there, that wasn't easy. She was taking this picture, and that's me standing on that white rock over there. That was not any mountain goat yarn. But fortunately, we did find some. There's me with my big catch. I was pretty excited, but it was pretty steep going, and I'd like to say that it was all miserable, but it was not, and that's my favorite picture of Kenny Grant. He was there last night. Anyway, so we had a really good time, except for Terry, who was sitting on the side of the hill going, "Can we go down yet?" It was really exciting, but we only got a little bit, and it ended up just being really dirty. And we had Ernestine Hamlin went up with us. She's a weaver from Hoona, and we decided that the Indian lady, little old weavers were not going out there and getting the wool. I could imagine they got some incidental catch, but mostly they were doing it another way. So we started looking at other options, and I think that Sitka now has a subsistent seasonal use permit, but I don't think that it's being used too much anymore. So moving on, I started going more to museums, and I thought I could get more information there. Getting into a museum isn't always easy when you're first learning how to weave, because you say, well, I want to learn how to weave, can I look at everything in your back room? At that point in time, when I was in my early 20s, it was the beginning of the Repatriation Act, and all of the museums were a little nervous. And you'd say, can I look at all of your native stuff? And they'd say, what do you want to look at it for? Because they were afraid. But I pulled enough strings and I got enough contacts to get into the Smithsonian. I was surprised to find that the Thingat stuff was in the Museum of Natural History. I had gone to the American Museum of American History, and they said, no, the native stuff is in with the bones and the dinosaurs and the Hope Diamond. And I said, okay. So I went there, and if you've ever seen the Raiders of the Lost Ark, you know, at the very end when they walk into that warehouse that's just full of stuff, that's the Museum of Natural History. So they took me, and there's just huge rooms full of these big stacks, and they put you on these little lifts, and they'd tell you what you could see. So I started going through it and finding things, and went to the Smithsonian a number of times, and they got more and more comfortable. And then I went with Mom and Terry, and we started looking at more things. And I started discovering that there was a whole pod of whales in there. I started finding so many whales, lots of whale robes, much like this one. Some of the whales were hiding. This whale is in a tunic that had been cut, just strips out of the front of a whale robe. And you can see the blowhole in the eyes, and if you look at it and if you know the whale pattern, you say, yeah, that's the whale pattern. Go ahead. Another whale. And I started noticing there were two distinct styles of whales. This is a whale that's got two blowholes on the bottom and a small circle. And it's very similar to this whale. Go ahead. Some of the, no, that's okay, the next one, the green one, next one.
Next one?
Yeah, that one. Some of them were busier in the mouth, like this one is a little busy in the mouth, and some of them had green, so it got really complicated, but it was really fun to look at them, and it started turning more into not so much I was always looking for how it was done, but then it became more of a, what am I looking at here? Who did these things, and maybe did some of these things go together? And then I started looking at signatures, and I started trying to put things together, and it's fascinating to look in the Smithsonian's and in all the different museums. So next. This is the signature from the last one, and you'll notice that on each piece, like this one, there's a distinct signature that's at the bottom of the side braids, and this one has it's kind of missing its side braids. They must have had a hard time with the time, but usually at the base of the side braids it's tied off, and each weaver would do their own special tie off, and that was the signature. Sometimes the signatures are the same, and I remember talking to someone and saying, yes, my auntie let me have her signature, or I use my auntie's signature, and you could tell some of the robes in the museums, you'd see the same signature, you'd say, that's not the same weaver, and you'd know it was somebody learning from their auntie, and they would have that signature. Another whale robe, this is one that's got the less busy mouth, more like the one I wove, but similar green patterns. And so I started looking at the materials once again and saying, how old are these robes, and how do I tell, is this one that could possibly have been made in the mid-1800s? Or is it something newer, you know? So part of what I would look at would be, is it made out of mountain goat? Does it have commercial wool in it? Has it got sheep in it? What kind of dyes did they use? And it was very fun in the museums to look at these things. Go ahead.
Next one.
Yeah, excellent. That's the signature from that one. I thought it was particularly fun because the green was so bright. Usually when you see the green, you think it's copper. Like this one is obviously got the copper dye because it's that kind of sagey colored green. And it looks like a very old robe, although it may not even be older than this one. Some of the robes were in pretty tough shape. This one obviously had been left folded a long time. But you look at it and say, well, it's got that green and it's got that yellow. It's probably pretty old. But then we started looking at them with black lights, and that was interesting for the different dyes because if you got the really old dyes, they would just glow bright, just really bright. And it was kind of like forensics, you know. And the curators or the conservators would say, why is it so bright? Is it because it's the moss? Is it because it's the copper? And I'd say, no, it's probably because of the urine that they used to set the moss. And so they'd go, oh yeah, and those are really bright. But it was kind of fun. So, go ahead. This one I enjoyed hugely because a lot of the robes that you would see in the museums, some of them were obviously collected old robes. Perhaps they came from a grave and they would have a lot of deterioration. Some of them were very pristine and beautifully woven robes. But some of them looked like they obviously were made to sell to a museum. They'd say, you know, these museums love these robes. I'm going to just put this together as quick as possible. This particular robe was excellent, and I wish I'd had a better picture of the side panels because they were just empty squares. I called it the television robe because the one in the middle looked like a TV with antennas. But this person, it was nicely woven. It was like, yeah, those museum people don't know nothing. We'll just put this together. And here you go. And they bought it. It worked. They bought it. That's in the Smithsonian, and it's fabulous. And this is the signature. They were proud enough of it that they signed it. It's pretty good. Another whale robe. This one's very similar also to this robe. It's got the real busy mouth in very good condition. But a lot of it is commercial yarn when I looked at this one. But almost all or always the warps are mountain goat because the warps have to be the leg spun. So that was the one thing that they didn't replace with the commercial yarn. Even on the new ones, they still have the leg spun. Okay, so then I went, and we were invited to go to Philadelphia. They have a lot of robes. They have so many robes. Louis Shotridge collected for the museum in Philadelphia. And his wife was a weaver, and so we looked at several of their robes. It was a good time. Everybody had a lot to say, and I just stared at everything, apparently. But this is a beautiful whale as well. Some of them were in pretty tough shape. Once again, this is in amazing condition. I mean, because it's probably an older robe than this one, but depending on how they were stored, a lot of them have insect damage or rodent damage because they were just too tasty. But okay. And once again, the signature, and I find this signature very interesting because it matches the one on the robe in that cabinet over there, so I really have to look at that a little more closely. Okay. Then I managed to get invited to a museum in England, and this is the Sainsbury, I believe I'm not saying that right. It's in Norwich in the north part of England on the North Sea. It was really very fun. And the conservator called because she wasn't sure what she needed to do to this robe to preserve it. And I said, nothing. But she was very worried about the green panels at the top. And you'll notice that there are some of that green color in this robe as well. And what she didn't realize is that it had just faded differently. When they started buying wool or getting wool or trading for wool or getting sheep wool, it would all look the same when you get it. It's all black, but if it's from different dye lots, some of them weren't as color fast as others. And after a little while in the sun, patches of it that would have come from one dye lot would turn a different color. It caused that particular curator a lot of concern, and I convinced her not to try and repair the color on it. Yeah, and this is the signature from that particular robe, and you can see the condition of it. I mean, it's really beautiful, a beautiful robe, but also another whale. I have yet to come up with I mean, I haven't really heard of a clan. There are clan houses that are whales. There's lots of whales in the legends, but there are so many whale robes that it's really hard to say, you know, who's the story behind the whale, who is the whale house. But part of what I'm getting at with all of this talk about museums and all of the whales in the museums and being able to go to the museums and look at these things, I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have a teacher, but I wanted to weave Chilkat. And I put a lot of time and energy into learning to weave Chilkat. And were it not for the ability to go to museums and look at old robes, it would have been very, very hard and very discouraging to do it, because you'd get so far and then you would say, how do I do this? How do I do this? And so I would go to the Anchorage Museum. I would go to the Anchorage Museum, one more, and look at their robes. This is a robe that's in the Anchorage Museum right now. It's had a tough life, but it's still out there teaching. And when you would go to a museum and they would show you a robe like this is not a robe that a museum would put on display. This is a robe they'd keep in the back room, and they would say, well, it's important, but we don't know why it's important. If you're a weaver, it's hugely important because it's coming unraveled, and you can see how it went together. And so it helps to teach you how to make one, because you can say, oh, I couldn't tell that when it was all so perfect. And then it starts to come apart and you say, look, there's a drawstring in there. Of course, that makes sense. So you can learn a lot from the old robes that are too tired, well, they would say too tired to carry on anymore. I don't know what happened to this one to cause this. Go ahead. We tried to guess. It obviously was used after whatever happened, because someone, and oh, my grandmother would have done that. Don't worry, I'll fix it. Crochet, crochet, crochet. So. Yep, good as new. And probably when you were wearing it, you know, the front would be on the front, and so you could stand there and look pretty good. And from a long ways away, you can tell, but it's okay. But on the back, those holes didn't get fixed, because maybe your chapeau would cover it, or maybe your hair would cover it, or maybe you just wouldn't turn around. You know, so it was probably still used after it was damaged, but now the museum has it, and I still look at it. The Anchorage Museum is nice enough to let me in. When I was first learning, I didn't get to go into the back rooms of the Anchorage Museum, but upstairs in the museum they had a display, the Alaska display, which has recently come down. And there was a diorama there, life-size, with big mannequins. And in that display was a mannequin of a Tlingit man with a dagger and a robe on like this. It was, now that I think about it, kind of aggressive, but I don't think he was hurting anybody in the diorama. So he was standing there, and you could see the back of the robe through the glass. So there was a permanent nose mark right there. From me, I would go there and stare at it on a regular basis, and I'd go home and I'd go, and I'd go back to the museum. I think that the docents thought I was in love with the mannequin because I would just go and stare at him for hours. But go ahead. Yeah, that's the signature from the tired robe. Next one. So then this year, they took the diorama down and they've changed out the Alaska display. And the conservator there had heard my story, and she called me and said, you want to look at that knot behind the glass? And I said, I want to look at the back. So this is the piece that was in the display at the Anchorage Museum. And I spent quite a bit of time just truly enjoying it. And the interesting thing is that's the back, and look how bright those colors are. You know, I'm not going to turn this one around, but on the back of this, the colors are much brighter as well because of the light that kind of wore them out. Go ahead. And, oh dear, I don't know where that one's from. Oh, I do too know that one. So this is a robe that is also in Philadelphia, and I'm very interested in this robe in Philadelphia now. I am very interested in this robe in Philadelphia because it's a fairly old robe. It's got a mixture of mountain goat weft and some commercial sheep wool. It's in pretty good shape. It's pretty much the exact same pattern as this one. Yeah, go ahead. And it's got this really great signature. That's really similar to this really great signature. That's a little mixed up because the braid had to be stabilized, which is this robe. So I think I'm just going to have to go back to Philadelphia and see if there aren't any more similarities between that robe and this robe, because they do appear to be really close in weaving it, and close in the signature, and close in the age, which is very viable that it could be the age of Seward, just because of the post-contact ability to get to some sheep's wool and the pre-contact need for the dyes and for the wools that are in it. So anyway, that's the end of that. And I just want to say that now that we can have lights again, so we can cover that. In closing, I would like to say how important it is that this has come back, not just for, I mean, it's hugely important for the community, and it's hugely important for the culture to have this back as part of our history, and it's important to have it back as part of our stories and our legend and our written language. But as a weaver, being hugely selfish like I am, as a weaver, I know how hard it is to learn to weave. And there are not that many of us that are still doing this weaving because life gets in the way of weaving. You know, it takes so long, and you can't really afford to, well, I think I'll spend the next 3 years just weaving on this robe. You have to have children and do other things. So there aren't going to be that many mentors out there to teach the weaving. But as long as there are pieces like this, and pieces like the ones falling apart, and pieces like that there, people who say, I really want to learn how to do this, you can do it without a living mentor. You can learn to weave chilkat just by going to museums and seeing pieces like this. So for me, that is a huge part of why this is an important gift. And now that it's here where people probably are learning to weave chilkat, not that somebody on the East Coast might not want to learn how to weave chilkat, but more likely up here. So this is a very great gift that you've given us. And thank you. Kunachish, as they say. And thank you all. Yeah.
Did you get any information? You mentioned that there were some robes that were made for sale to museums. Did you get a sense of the relative ages of those
They are
robes
all over the
compared to
board.
this robe?
They're all over the board. Some of them are obviously fairly new. Some of them are really old and probably weren't so made for sale. But some, like that one that was just mixed up pieces. Sometimes you can look at ones and say, you know, this pattern looks like half of one pattern and half of another pattern, and you think, well, I think that a lot of weavers were careful not to sell robes if they were weaving it for sale, which had to be done, you know. I mean, we went from subsistence to money, so we had to do something, and what's valuable, people are buying robes. So I don't want to sell this really important robe, but I'm a weaver, so I'll make one. Well, I don't want to make this one with this pattern because it belongs to the tribe. So I'll take that pattern and I'll just change it up, you know, and I'll make it not the right thing, and I'll sell it to a museum. And some of them are like that, but without really knowing, it's hard to tell, you know. But I mean, you can get a sense from looking at it and say, well, in my opinion, but it's always just my opinion, you know. You can't say, well, oh, this one was obviously made for sale. I could never say that because it might not be so.
That you feel that this robe was not made for sale?
This one, I don't know. I don't know. It's a whale. There's a lot of whales in museums. And does that mean anything? Well, it means that whales were hugely popular at that time. I don't know. I couldn't say, honestly. but it's certainly in fine shape, and it certainly doesn't look like it was ever used for anything like, it was never, I don't think it was a burial robe. I don't think it was, you know, it's just, it's so pristine for its age. But of course, it's also been hanging nicely and cared for, other than its fleeing fire. So, yeah, it's hard to say.
You didn't mention the design board.
Oh
there.
gosh, how could I forget that? The grand discovery is that the design board for this is over there in the case. So, what a design? The design. Okay, so when you're weaving a robe, you paint a board, or you have a board painted. That is the design, and usually it's the middle part and one of the sides, and you sit it next to you without the trim. It's just a board like this, and you sit it next to you while you're weaving. You say, about that big, you know. And they would use them more than once, but that's how you would do a design board. Funny story, when I had my design board and I started weaving, and my husband, who's an engineer, came in and said, so how do you know how to do this? And I said, well, I saw a picture once, and he was quiet for a long time. And then he said, you know, I saw a picture of the space shuttle once. I think I'll make me one. Yeah, well, I showed him my going. But, yeah, so the pattern board for this is right over there. So you and it is the pattern board for this. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. Cool. Yeah?
So how do you tell whether it's sheep's wool or mountain wool, and how do you tell whether they're commercial yarns or not? And what is this one made of?
Oh, okay. So this one, I looked at it really hard. The way to tell, one of the main key ways to tell if it was a yarn that was made by the weaver or by one of the weaver's people or something that they acquired is the spin and the ply. So commercial yarn is spun in a Z direction, if you know anything about spinning. It's spun one direction and plied the other direction. So it's spun in what they call the Z direction and plied in the S direction. So when it goes together, there's an angle to it that matches an S. The wool that was spun here was plied, spun in a S direction and plied in the Z direction. So the angle that's on the yarn goes in a Z. So if you look at it and go, well, that's Z and that's S. So you can tell if it was probably purchased or spun locally. The other way to tell is the fiber themselves. And if you are allowed to touch it without gloves on, which doesn't always happen, and in some museums you can't touch it even with gloves on. And if you go to the British Museum, you can't even be in the room when they move it. That's kind of an interesting place. They say, okay, now leave, and then you come back and magically it's something else. And I don't know how they do it. The mountain goat is ever so much softer. So if you went like this on the front of mountain goat and went like this on the front of the sheep is definitely scratchier. And if you want, I've got some mountain goat and some merino and some other fibers up here that I was going to let people feel, but you'll have to come up and do it because that'll be a long time. But yeah, it's partially the feel and partially the look, and a lot of it is the spin, how it's spun and plied. So this one, when I looked at it, I believe that the white, and this would be this, well, it's hard to tell. So there is white, there is yellow, there is a green, and there is black. All the ones that are kind of this gray color were probably black. I mean, sure they were black to begin with, and then they faded. But they, I believe, are sheep and were purchased wool, or traded for wool, or acquired wool. The white and the yellow both are Z-plied, and I believe them to be mountain goat. They look like mountain goat. They have that sheen and that really softness. And the green is very unusual because I think it's just single ply, and I think that it's sheep also. I think that it's been acquired, but it looks like it was dyed with the copper, so it was probably acquired white and then dyed with the copper dye, because it has that copper green, which is interesting that they wouldn't have dyed it with, you know, acquired dyes. But it's kind of, it's a nice old piece. So I think it's a mixture. And a lot of the ones that were not purchased ones, usually it was the sheep ones that I'm seeing in the museums that tended to go this camel green. I think that there was a particular run of yarn, because like the one in England had that patch of this camel green, and that's the color it seems to go to. So I'm not sure if there wasn't a particular yarn on the market at that time that looked black when they wove it, but strangely enough, 100 years later, it doesn't look black anymore. But some of it held up really well. Did I answer your question? I don't know.
I mean, can you source foreign commercial yarn?
No, I can't. Somebody probably could, maybe a more of a textile researcher than me. But I've gotten as far as saying, oh yeah, it looks commercial and looks spun, hand spun. But that's...
There is a textile museum in Washington, D.C.
I bet that they could, but I've never tried that. Would be worth trying. Yeah?
So with the raven's tail, how do you tell if you look at the blanket whether it's raven's tail or still cat? And then also, I don't understand why you can't do the picture with the raven's tail.
So, raven's tail, chocat. So, because Terry did raven's tail, I did chocat. No, raven's tail was more like the basket weaving, and it's mostly a matter of the technical rules, how it's done. So with raven's tail, you take a piece of yarn, or a pair of yarn, and you start on one side, and you weave it straight across, and it's a geometric design, and a lot of it is spaced weaving. It's very much like the baskets, and it has a lot of the same patterns that were on the baskets. You'll get, like this is the raven's tail design, which is how it got that nickname. But you see this design, this basket design, on a lot of the raven's tail baskets, or weavings. The other thing is it doesn't have cedar in its warps. It's just, the warps are leg spun still, but and a fairly dense, but it doesn't have the cedar in it like the Chilkat does. So if you were looking at a museum and you said, this would be raven's tail, there are some crossover pieces. You look at it and you say, well, that's got raven's tail in it, and it's also got some Chilkat patterning in it. And I think they're just creative combinations because it lends itself to that. With Chilkat, you can go back and forth and do all this painting and all this freestyle stuff, but it had some pretty straightforward rules that you had to follow, like every color has to have a braid around it of the same color, and then you move on to another color. So there are rules about how it's woven, and you can go back and forth. So you could do circles, because you can go back and forth with that color. You can do the ovoid shapes, because you can go back and forth and come up to it with other colors. You don't have to start here and take that same piece and go all the way to the other side and tie off. So you can fill in areas with it. Even though, this looks kind of raven's tail-ish because of the lines and stuff, but still it's compact twining. It's all together. There's no skip stitch, and everything has a border of its own color around it. So the rules are followed of Chilkat with the back of this, even though it looks more like the raven's tail. Does that make sense?
I think if she looked at them closer,
Yeah, you're welcome to look at these on your out.
she could see the space in there and
Yeah.
the compactness of the Chilkat.
Yeah.
And if you use for a shuttle, or if you don't use a shuttle, do you use a painted or?
That's it. That would be the story of the Z spin and the S spin, is that if it's spun S, like commercial stuff, when you twist it, if you do it like this, it unplies. So a lot of people get around that when they use commercial stuff by plying it, by weaving it this way, but then it goes meh, and then you have to go push. You can go across and then pushing it up. Everybody's got these little tools, If you have stuff that you've spun yourself and it's Z, you weave it this way and it just packs right up. You don't have to go back and push it. It just packs as you weave it. So I'm sure that's probably part of why they did it is because leg spinning, that's how it goes. Unless you leg spin it this way, which would be hard. I don't do it this way. But yeah, so that you don't have to. It just goes there. Yeah.
So did you ever find a mentor after all your wandering in museums?
No. Well, no, I found many mentors, many mentors. And I display their pictures. They're mostly just robes. But no, I never ended up with a mentor. Yes.
So I know you've done a lot of research about signatures.
Yes.
Building a database. I understand they're not 100% unique, but
Yes.
so how many signatures have you identified with just guessing?
I don't know. Because some of the signatures were used more than once. I think I've seen Jenny Chanot's signature on so many pieces that I know aren't Jenny's. But it's like, oh yeah, Jenny gave me her signature. It's like, okay, So there are, I don't know. I've seen only a few, like the one that's the zigzag lines on that one. I've only seen that a few times. This one that's the wrapped individual lumps. I've only seen that like a couple of times. But I've probably seen, I don't know, dozens of signatures.
Have you ever seen any without signature?
Yes, one without a signature. Actually, I've seen a couple without a signature. There's a robe in the Cantor Museum at Stanford that I spent some time looking at, and I didn't show it because it wasn't a whale. But they had asked me to come and look at it. I was down there doing a drum making thing, and they were afraid that it might have been a grave piece, and so I went in to look at it, and it had no signature because it had no side braids. The side braids had been completely removed, and it had a very, very short fringe, like that short, and it was obviously impacted with fluid. It had stains all over it, and so we looked at it really hard, but it was in good shape. And we finally looked at it hard enough to realize that actually what had happened is it had been in a fire. And so a lot of the fringe that wasn't cut, the ones that were just really short, were burnt. And so I think it had been in a fire, and that was why it had the look it did. And probably the side braids burned off, which is why it didn't have a signature. But there was one other I found, and that's in the, it used to be part of the Rasmussen collection with NBA, National Bank of Alaska. But then they sold out to Wells Fargo, so now it's in the Wells Fargo collection in the museum in Anchorage. And they have it on the wall, and the signatures have been removed from it because it's just kind of hanging there like this, and they were taken out. And I asked the man there who manages their museum, I said, so what do you know about the signatures? And he's going, what signatures? I said, yeah, what signatures? And he had no idea, and I didn't expect that he would. So I'd love to ferret out that story, because somewhere along the line somebody didn't want their auntie to know that they sold their robe. And so, I can't imagine that anybody who was buying it would have taken them out. They wouldn't have even known, and they wouldn't have done it. But somebody took those out. So I don't know. That's the only one I've seen that didn't have signature. Yeah.
I have a question. I remember when Terry Roper was alive, and I could see her making the Raventail blanket stuff. She was going to teach me, but we love that stuff.
Yeah.
I made it, she didn't. But I noticed that some of the Chilkat blankets, they're very old compared to the ones that are not as old.
Mm-hmm.
It almost seems like you could tell if there was a different person that made them. Can you guys tell if some of the blankets were made by one person compared to the same kind of quilt, same kind of blanket, but by a different person?
I am trying to, and the signatures help with that. And sometimes you look at the signatures and they're the same, and obviously it was not the same person. And sometimes you look at a robe and you say, wow, this looks a lot like the weaving that I saw in some other museum, and then you have to go back and look at your pictures, and I'm working on that. But there's a lot of data there that I'm trying to pull together. I'm hoping to come up with more like that, to be able to figure it out. Yes?
You said you saw another Chilkat that was not whale. How many different designs are there in the Chilkat?
Oh, God, so many. I don't know. It depended on how. There's a lot of designs out there, and they keep making more. My next robe's not going to be one that's been done before. But there are a lot of them that are similar, and a lot of them that are done more than once. So there's a lot of whales. There are several different forms of whale, and the only whales I showed are ones that were diving whale. ones that were either with the busy mouth, I call it, or with the straight mouth. But there's also whales that are obviously killer whales, you know, they'll have the fins.
From different clans?
A lot of them are, yeah. Different
that
clans,
had
different houses.
Whales and different.
Yeah, there's a lot, and there's a lot of ones that are obviously a bird, or obviously, you know, you see something, you say, well, that might be a bear, but it's got a tail. I don't know. So, you know, and those are the ones where the museum says, so what's this? And you say, I have no idea. But you can guess, yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about the form elements in that road? Like, there's the two blowholes. Now, does that
Yeah.
mean it's a humpback?
No,
Or
I don't
there were
know.
other whales with two blowholes?
Usually, so the two holes,
Yeah.
if you're looking at a Chilcat form line piece, usually there's certain pieces that are always this, you know, like this is this large, more round circle is almost always some major joint, like a shoulder or a hip. Like in this case, it's raven with a hip.
Shelley, can
Yeah?
I give you this pointer and you can point up at the
Oh.
picture so people in the audience have a better sense of.
Better than me just
Yeah,
doing this.
and maybe just point out the three different panels.
How do I
And
make it work?
you
Oh,
just press it and hold it.
Oh, cool. Okay, so, wow, power, the power of the pointer. Okay, so with the blowholes, I know, you know, there's a, it could be that, but usually on every Chilcat piece, there is somewhere that is the nose or the blowhole, and it might be a bear, it might be a wolf, it might be a whale, it might be anything, but whatever it is has some combination of these two nostrils in the area of the nose. Like this one. This one has slightly different combination, but it still has two. Can you see it back there? Yes. Even though it's a different mouth form and a different way that it looks. So there's almost always two holes that represent the nose. And then, you know, of course, in this case, there's all this busyness, and I had somebody once say, well, that's because it's a baleen whale, and they have that busy mouth. And that could be, you know, I mean, that makes sense. This is the cheek. This represents the cheek of the animal, and this is the eye and the ear, because they always have ears. If you see the eye and it happens to be upside down, even if it's upside down down here, if it's upside down, it's situated somewhere in the tail of whatever the animal is. So if it's down here and it has a bear face, well, it's the bear's rear end. You know, so anything upside down is in a tail. So this is the tail flukes on the whale, right here. So you say this is one side of the tail flukes and one side of the tail flukes. Then you've got the spirit, the spirit of the animal, because all of the animals have their spirit, and that's what's represented by the face. And then snow goggles, because everybody loves snow goggles. So, and I have asked lots of questions about this particular thing. I like to call it the duck beak of the whale. I am not sure what that represents, but it is always in this particular configuration of the busy mouth of the whale is that piece. So I know it sounds silly because I say silly things about the forms, but these things always are. So like on the side, this is a raven, and sometimes the raven's on the side, or whatever the animal is on the side. You can tell it's a different animal because there's this white line that goes between the two form lines. So all this black form line is this whale. And then on the other side of this solid white line that splits them up is another different creature. In this case, it's been classified as a seated raven or a young raven. Although this one doesn't have, you know, sometimes they have a spirit face in them, or it would be a half, because this is one side of the bird, this is the other side of the bird. So you put them together and they form one. So that would be two different. But sometimes on a Chilcat, you'll find that those side ones are just a duplicate of the centerpiece, of the center pattern, only in profile. And it'll be a simplified version of the centerpiece. You'll find all the same elements, or some of the main same elements will be in the sides. So I'm not sure why they did it that way. You know, because sometimes it's like I said, a different animal, and sometimes it's the same animal, only split and simplified.
Some of the other railroads you showed looked like they had sea lions in the sides.
They might have, yeah. Yeah, so it's all different, you know? Although, you know, this is a very common one. This is a common road. There's 2 real common whales and then a lot of just other whales. And I think, I think you could probably maybe trace down clan lineages off of the more unique whales because they have things in them that might be more specific to a clan than this one, or say that one, which are a little more generic. But some of them that maybe have sea lions in the sides, or maybe have something really unique in the fins, or you know, some very unique parts. But I'm not knowledgeable enough about the patterning to be able to say, oh, that belongs to this clan, you know, or that looks like. It would have to be somebody who knew the patterns.
Or the weaver.
Yeah, or the weaver, I suppose. Yeah.
Your next road is going to be different than anything anybody's ever done.
Yeah, everybody does things different. Anybody else? Have I worn you out yet? I know there's cookies.
I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
So last night, one of the things that was going to happen was like a history of Chilkat, and no one did that. So yeah, so
I might be out of it.
no, but Tlingett's wove Chilkats, but Simsian's wove Chilkats, and Haida's wove Chilkats. So
and you're just jumping right into a big ball of worms right there. Of course, the Tlingett's were the first
Of
to
course
do it,
they
and
were.
the only ones to really do it correctly. Is that what you're doing? No,
That's right.
If
she were Haida, she'd have said
Oh, if I were Haida,
she would have said the same.
you know what's really funny?
I
is go-
noticed the Davenports haven't claimed that they were the first ones to wake up.
No, I have been to a lot of museums, and you know, and you look at something and say, oh, that's definitely Tlingit, and it's been claimed by the Haida, and I say, hey, now wait a minute, it's like, and it's all the really pretty stuff, you know. I say, no, these are the, it's a hot debate right now.
okay.
And there are a lot of people who say we were the first ones to do it. And I'm going to stay out of that debate. There may be on the nearby horizon some technology that may be able to say, oh, this wool came from, and actually Terry was caught on that trail, and she has a, whatever that analysis piece of machinery that she got from the nuclear physics.
XRF.
Yes.
X-ray fluorescence.
Who was going to
That's right.
say where all of the materials came from and be able to, but that hasn't happened because she's not doing it. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to speculate. There's
No, I didn't watch it.
yeah, no, but
that
it is fun to know that debate is hotly moving
because
on.
one of the stories is someone married into a different,
Different clan. Yeah,
and then
well,
and the women took the robe apart to learn
Yeah.
how to put it back together.
yeah. Well, I think that they married the god, that somebody that lived in the sun or something, and came down. Yeah. Yeah.
Have you been to see whatever?
No, I have not. Terry went. I really want to go, but I have not had a chance to go yet. I have heard that they are amazing, and I have heard that they limit your time with them to like an hour a day because they are so soaked in dangerous chemicals. Yeah, Terry was saying that, you know, they said she could only be there for so many hours a day because they were full of arsenic and pesticides and things. That they didn't realize at the time when they were preserving them would make them such toxic artifacts. So somebody had their hand up here. No? Yeah.
I question is 241. Are the Chilkat blankets in the raven tail both from goat, and the dyes, are they like from berries and stuff? Because I don't remember.
So they were originally from mountain goat. And of course now we're using merino or whatever we can use. And the dyes were originally, the yellow was wolf moss, was a wolf moss thing. The green was from copper. The black was hemlock and iron. Hemlock bark and iron combination. And the white, of course, was light white. It's really hard to get them to be color fast in light, obviously. This has lost a lot of color. I've only managed to be able to use the copper. That's the only one I've gotten. And this one is actually the copper dye, the traditional style copper dye. and I stuck it in a window for a long time, and it didn't fade. I was pretty proud of myself. I wouldn't leave it forever in a window, but the other ones, it's really hard to get them. I don't know what they did. You know, obviously it still fades, but gee, after a couple hundred years, I probably will too. So, anybody else? No? Thank you all.
Thank you.
To have you here. You've studied so many roads and so many museums and traveled so much, and you've been such a help to help us document the Davenport Road better and better understand, you know, its background and its makeup, and also some of its weaknesses and its strengths. And we're just excited to learn more, and we'll continue to work on it together. And we're looking forward to making this accessible to a lot of researchers who come, and a lot of young artists and future generations. So thank you again for making that possible.
Moving into its next job as a mentor. It's going to have some well-deserved rest, lying down for a while, and then it's going to become a mentor.
So will you do anything with the fringe? Or will you leave the fringe just the way it is?
I think we should leave it the way it is. I think, well...
Complete with the knots.
Complete with the knots. No, I would not undo the knots. No, the knots are definitely the best story. Yeah. Ethnically impacted by the last tribe that had it.
It was a try.
The best story of all.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you everybody for coming tonight. Thank you for being here last night. Well, not here, but at Centennial Hall, and for celebrating with us. And thanks to all of the elders and people who traveled from far away. Ray and Andy had to leave, so they're not here.
I have one question.
Yes.
Is it possible to angle that a little bit so I can see the back side?
Oh, you know what? Can we? Well, no, it's fine.
We can do that.
Let's just turn it around so we can see it one time. Because the back side is fabulous. Here, if you want to go that way, I'll go this way.
Okay. You want me to go this way?
Yeah, you go to that chair. And I'll go this way. And then
Somebody
you
has
go
to make a beep, beep, beep noise
Beep,
while we do this, right?
beep. So this is the back, and this is the colors.
Oh, yeah.
I believe those are probably still a little, want to move it to the table. Probably still a little bit faded, but would definitely be much brighter. Yeah. Nothing like the back of a road if you're a weaver. That's the side you want to look at.
Does anyone from the Friends want to come up and say a few words?
Where's Rosemary?
Board President?
Well, I just want to, I mean, I don't know, these poor folks are probably sick and tired of being thanked, but it has been obviously such an amazing journey for this road and for all of us. And it has just been amazing. And to have you to come down and to look at this and to explain and give that much more information, we're just very, very
So
pleased.
much a pleasure.
Yeah. So thank you very much.
So I'll say something that someone said to me recently about Pete and Amy's meeting is that, because Pete's the tribal court judge, is that it's like a child. It's like a lost child. And Pete's job as a judge is to bring children back and recreate a family for them. And so they met, and the robe has come back, and we're going to create a family for it. So.
My favorite story from last night was when you were a little girl.
Everybody not.
Everybody did the best story. I think we should hear it again.
Oh, it was just that, well, where it was on the landing of my grandparents' house, it was almost, as small children, it was almost irresistible. There's nothing between you and me and the robe, and it was really hard not to go by and run my fingers through the fringe, and I think we all probably did that. I assume we all did that, but I certainly did it. And my grandmother was quite strict, and she had, she really cared well for the things in her home, and she had some very beautiful things in her home. And she was quite strict, and I was a bit afraid of her when I was young. And so I remember doing this, and I pulled one of the pieces of fringe pulled apart, and I was horrified that she would find me out. So I just nodded them back, thinking that was, and she never did say anything. So but she probably, knowing my grandmother, she probably knew, but chose on that account not to say anything. But so you will see there may even be more than one knot, actually. now that I'm confessing.
Well, everyone, please feel free to ask Shelley questions about her beautiful work up on the table and take a closer look at it. Feel free to introduce yourself to the Davenports and say thank you. Also, there are some refreshments in the lobby provided by the Friends, and we've had some generous support for the events of the last 2 days, including from Wells Fargo, the Sesquicentennial Group, and C-Mart, and First Bank. So thank you very much, and thank you, Friends of Sheldon Jackson Museum. If anyone's interested in becoming a member, you can speak to Laura Bennett, the AmeriCorps, or to Rosemary or Margie, and all of your support goes to make events like this possible, and to just make history, just like tonight and last night. So thank you very much, and enjoy.